After squandering a 15-point lead in the fourth quarter, Miami did just enough in overtime to secure an ugly win versus the Charlotte Hornets. Jimmy Butler led the way with 35 points and a near triple-double, but got little support from his teammates. What went wrong? Can the team's problems be fixed, or is it time to shake things up? I break down the game and answer your questions on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Heat Nation. It's a Friday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm your host, David Ramil. Today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. After a buzzer-beating loss to the Blazers on Monday, Miami was back on the court Thursday for the first of a two-game set versus the Charlotte Hornets, who had lost 6 straight games and was on the second night of a back-to-back set. Seems like a perfect recipe for an easy Miami Heat win. It certainly looked that way, despite the fact that the Miami didn't look sharp to start the game, but they did just enough to build a 15-point lead in the third quarter. And then Miami did what they did versus Portland on Monday, which is to simply fall apart in the fourth quarter. And despite the early lead, they were down 5 with less than 4 minutes of the game. Then Jimmy Butler went to work, scoring 6 of his 10 fourth quarter points to help Miami get a 2-point lead. But Dennis Smith Jr. tied the game with 26 seconds left at 104 apiece, and Miami put the ball in Jimmy's hands to give them the win. Instead, almost 20 seconds elapsed before anything resembling a play even started to fill out on the court. Jimmy moved the ball somewhat, only to drive into Terry Rozier, get called for an offensive foul. A missed shot from Rozier on the other end sent the game to overtime. And again, Miami did just enough in the extra period to hold on, going 9 of 9 from the free throw stripe and getting a 117-112 victory. Miami's record now stands at 5-7, so 2 games under 500. They also unveiled their Miami mashup jerseys, their Volume 2, a variation of last year's mashup jerseys, except last year's were in black, this year's in white. More number combinations. And I should also add that you can get up to 12,000 different unique combinations with those numbers. So that was fun. Yeah, it kind of felt like last year too, where when they unveiled their mashup, I think they lost a number of games in those early mashup jerseys. And everybody's kind of thinking, well, maybe the mashup jerseys aren't such a good idea. But I think this is more about the concerns regarding the Miami Heat rather than anything they were wearing on the floor. They could have been wearing any jersey or no jersey at all and still wind up kind of finding a way to crap the bed. Totally falling apart. This question came in via direct message on Twitter. Is Miami just not very good? And normally I'm going to answer some of your other listener questions later on the show. And of course, I'll give out some credit cookies, although I feel really, really strongly opposed to the idea of giving credit to anybody aside from Jimmy and for tonight's win. But to the overall question about whether or not Miami is any good, I will say Charlotte is a lot pluckier than we give them credit for. I think the 6 straight losses is somewhat of a misleading fact there, mostly because they're without their starting point guard, who I am not a believer in. LaMelo Ball, despite his all-star selection. It's a flashy playmaker and everything else like that. I don't know that he necessarily contributes to a great deal of winning more than just a great deal of fun, right? It's great to watch him because he makes these great passes and he has that wonky shot of his that I can't stand seeing. And it was somewhat consistent last year when he made the All-Star game, but I'm not a believer. He's also hurt. They've also got a number of injuries. They've lost Miles Bridges too, who should be out of the league and is out of the league. So that's a whole other conversation. But they were also without Terry Rozier, their second leading scorer during that 6-game stretch. They went 1-5 with him out there. So, I think there are reasons why they are as bad as they have been. And yet, despite the second night of a back-to-back, they had hosted the Portland Trail Blazers in Charlotte, flew into the Hurricane Nicole, and still landed with just enough time to be able to handle tonight's game. we've seen teams do this before. We've seen Miami do this before, where they're facing some kind of adversity. Their rosters are blown up, and then all of a sudden they find a way to win. This is what makes them NBA players. Every win in the NBA is a good one. No win is a bad win. You find a way, you grit it out. Miami did that tonight. So credit to Miami and credit to Charlotte for keeping things interesting. I think they got a phenomenal performance from Kelly Oubre. I don't know if we'll see the likes of that again. He was getting far too many open looks, and he was able to capitalize on those. Rozier was getting challenged, and yet he still hit a couple of big shots. Dennis Smith Jr., who has been a really pleasant surprise for Charlotte this season, he had a big performance as well. So they got some pretty solid overall performances, and they were able to challenge Miami. Is Miami bad? To answer the question, I don't think they are. I think they're just still struggling. I'm still remaining optimistic. They are ugly to watch. They were ugly to watch last year, and they somehow wind up winning 53 games. But they had something. They had a tenacity, an identity that we have yet to see develop over the first 12 games of this season. And I think that's the difference, is whereas last year they found a way to gut it out, ugly wins, you take those. And it doesn't matter. You amass enough of them, and you somehow have a good record. It's why Miami was disrespecting the playoffs, is because they weren't overpowering anybody. They weren't clubbing them over the head. They weren't the Golden State Warriors, who were able to reel off 20 straight points in the third quarter or something like that in order to pull away to a victory. Miami has to fight and claw tooth and nail every game in order to have a decent chance of winning. This is what they did tonight. They were missing Tyler Herro. He's missing his second straight game, and his offense was certainly in a desperate need for Miami tonight. They could have used somebody to go get a bucket. That's still his best asset. He still could have been, if he had been out there, they probably would have found a way to pull away from the Hornets and be able to maintain that big lead. They had some struggling performances from a number of shooters tonight, specifically Max Strus. He was downright bad tonight. You don't want to put any pressure on him or give him blame necessarily, but he was bad as a starter, filling in for Tyler Herro. So I think that's a concern as well. I still believe this team will figure it out. I might be crazy. I might be wrong. I know a lot of people, again, think that I'm a homer. I don't think that's the case at all. I think I'm being objective and saying this year's team isn't significantly worse than last year's team, and last year's team struggled at times during the regular season. I know they were missing injuries. They were missing key players due to injury. Jimmy, Bam, Kyle Lowry, etc. Missed a certain number of games last year. Tyler missed games last year. It happens, and they still found a way to win. You put the ball in Jimmy's hands, and you hope for the best. That was the recipe for tonight. It led to a victory, and it led to again, you're trying to find ways to win early in the season until you get the team healthy. With Tyler out there, who knows what the outcome would have been. I know I've blamed him in the past. I know a lot of people have been critical about my blame of Tyler in the past. I think there are problems with Tyler and the way the offense bends to having him out on the floor. But at the very least, you can't deny, and I didn't deny this in my recap of Portland's loss either, is that if you have him out on the floor, you have somebody who can go and get you a bucket when Miami's offense just seems to completely fall apart, as it did in the fourth quarter. It was brutal out there. With the exception of those 10 points from Jimmy Butler, they were so bad, scoring only 16 points. They got outscored by 12 in the period. Charlotte found a way to just take over the game late. Again, big shots from a number of players: Dennis Smith, Oubre, Terry Rozier, Mason Plumlee, just finding a way to just get to the rim, get a putback dunk, out rebound the hell out of the Miami team. It was just not an ugly win, but it's a win, and you take it. I think they'll figure it out. Again, ask me this in 10 games. Ask me whether or not I'm as optimistic in 10 games if they continue to show this, and Miami hasn't shown any sign of improvements, and maybe my answer will be different. But for tonight, I'm still optimistic that this group can and will figure it out. If I had to point to any particular reason why Miami fell apart, the offensive concerns are huge. They got absolutely destroyed from the three-point line. I'm not sure exactly what happened. Players like Strus weren't hitting all game, but Caleb Martin wasn't hitting. Kyle Lowry was missing his shots. They just couldn't seem to buy a bucket from beyond the perimeter. And they were over-reliant on that, again, without anybody who's capable of getting to the rim or being able to be a three-level scorer. Tyler is still your best three-level scorer, and they just didn't have anybody. You have to give credit to Charlotte's defense. They did a really good job. of maximizing their size as well. Miami has a height problem. They are too undersized and not nearly potent enough offensively. So they're going to get exploited defensively. It's a combination of factors. They're going to get exploited offensively. They're going to get exploited on the boards. That leads to easier transition buckets for the Hornets. Miami, because of their switch-heavy defense, is constantly rotating. You've got mismatches. You do a fairly good job through grit and tenacity for 20 seconds in the shot clock, and then 4 seconds with left that same shot clock, you got a wide open basket, a wide open shot at the basket for Plumlee, Oubre, somebody, anybody. I mean, they were just Nick Richardson. So many wide open looks because eventually Miami is just trying too hard. They're just doing too much. This works over the course of the playoffs. We saw this last year for the playoffs. When you can slow things down, it certainly plays in Miami's favor. Miami is a team built for the playoffs. It's going to lead to some ugly wins against some ugly teams in the middle of the regular season. We saw that tonight, but a win is still a win. So be happy with that, Heat fans, because it's better than the alternative. But in any case, I'll answer some more of your listener questions later on in the show and give out credit cookies where they are due. But first and foremost, just wanted to tell you again about BetOnline. BetOnline.net continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting information, stats, news, and analysis. You can get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at betonline.net. And if you love sports, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. So it's a Heat victory, which means we're in the kitchen cooking up some credit cookies. I don't want to give those out. I know this is what we do on this show. You get a win, you give out some credit cookies. You get a loss, you dole out some tasteless blame pie. Almost everybody on this roster deserves a whole hell of a lot of blame pie tonight, but there are some players that did wind up having some solid performances. One player in particular had a really solid performance, so we'll give credit where credit is due. But because it was such an ugly win, they deserve an ugly cookie. Nope, and I just realized that I have been having technical difficulties there. If you lost the camera, so I'm sorry if my camera went out at some point. You're only able to overhear this for our viewers on YouTube. I will try to make sure that I avoid that in the future. But in any case, if you know anything about me and have been listening to the show or watching the show for a while, you know that my least favorite cookie of all time is the Thin Mint. Chocolate and mint, an abhorrent combination that nobody should ever have enjoyed or decided. Whatever evil person said, you know what? Let's mix these disgusting flavors. I mean, mint is fine on its own if you like gum or if you need something for your breath or something like that. That's okay. It doesn't belong in food. It doesn't even belong in your drinks. Caipirinhas notwithstanding. Sorry, get that crushed mint out of here. I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't want it in my cookies either. Chocolate is good on its own. You want a great cookie? Just leave it alone. Put chocolate in it. That's all you need. Chocolate chip cookies are fantastic. Thin mints, disgusting. And that's why we'll be giving out Thin Mints today, because they are disgusting cookies, and this was a disgusting win. So we'll start off with the obvious here. Jimmy Butler gets 7 credit cookies. He was phenomenal. 35 points, 8 assists. Let's see what his final stat line was as I pulled that up. 10 rebounds, 2 steals. Again, fantastic night. What can you say about Jimmy? Took it over. I know a lot of people have had concerns about him not dominating late in stretches. That last play at the end of regulation, notwithstanding, a really, really great night from him. Took over the game, was brought in early in the fourth quarter, which was perhaps Spo's best decision of the night. He'll be criticized a little bit later by one of your questions in the next segment. But he did bring in Jimmy a little earlier because, again, Miami had been squandered at 15-point lead. They were up 8 at the start of the fourth. Then they went up 12. And then somehow Charlotte went to build a 5-point lead. And by that point, the complete momentum had shifted in the Hornets' favor. Jimmy couldn't do anything to stop him. He had a couple plays defensively where, he was tired. He's carrying this damn team. Of course he's tired. But offensively, he did what you're supposed to do. He took over games. He was active defensively for the most part, attacked the basket, Didn't have the mid-range game going, and he had a couple shots fall, but for the most part, it was mostly at the rim. Took advantage of also getting to the line, hit some big free throws down the stretch. It's the kind of performance you want to see out of Jimmy Butler, especially late in the game when you need a win. So you know what? A win is a win. You take advantage of it. You hope for the best. Jimmy Butler gets 7 credit cookies. I'm also going to give 1 credit cookie to Bam Adebayo. I can already hear people complaining about it. The internet is screaming as I say this, but I think Bam's performance overall was pretty solid. And I'll tell you what, I know a lot of people are critical of who he is offensively. He played 39 minutes tonight, was 6 of 15 for the floor, but also was 6 of 6 at the line. His improvement, which they talked about in the Heat broadcast, has been phenomenal as nearly an 80% free throw shooter right now. He's been great. He continues to improve in that regard. I know he's not necessarily dominating in the scoreboard in terms of his points per game. I know those numbers have struggled. He did also have 14 rebounds in a night when Miami desperately needed each and every one of those boards. You cannot question Adebayo's effort. And I won't stand for it here on this podcast. You can complain if you want to, obviously. But I see Bam, and perhaps I'm deluding myself, but I think everybody watches Bam expecting him to fail or nitpicking when he doesn't have a 20-point game or a 30-point game or something along those lines. Instead, try watching all the other things he does. And that's what makes him such a special and unique player. I personally love seeing Bam Adebayo play. Watching him anchor the defense and be at its very heart and also run the offense for long stretches of the game is phenomenal to see out of a 6'9" forward center. And I know some people can debate what position he should or shouldn't be playing. It doesn't matter. He's a center. He's continuing to stay at center. That's not going to change anytime soon. Having said all that, I think it was a solid overall game for Bam. He did as much as he possibly could defensively. Missed a couple shots at the rim that I'm sure he would have liked to get back. Missed an earth-shattering dunk that he should have crammed over Plumlee's head. Instead, he wound up with just 18 points. If a couple of those shots fall, those easy shots at the rim that we've seen Bam make, I think, again, he has a 24, 26-point outing, and maybe everybody's tune would be a little different. Instead, tired legs. Why? Because, well, he was carrying the damn team too. So I think it's problematic to complain about what he doesn't do well and then overlook all the things that he does. But I will give 1 credit cookie to Bam Adebayo. I'm also giving 1 to Gabe Vincent. Despite the fact that he shot only 3 of 11 for the floor, 2 of 7 for three-point range, he had 4 big free throws in overtime. Showed some real chutzpah there. I think he was willing to take the free throws at the end. I really enjoyed that because he found a way to just get the ball and say, you know what? I know they're going to intentionally foul me to try and even up the game. I'm going to take those shots. Not Jimmy Butler, not Bam, not Max Strus, not anybody else, not Kyle Lowry and his championship ring. Gabe freaking Vincent, the two-way player from a couple of years ago, the undrafted guy, stepping up and hitting some big shots. So kudos to Gabe for hitting 4 of those free throws at the end there to give him 12 overall points of the night. He gets 1 credit cookie as well. So that's 9 in total, which means 1 last credit cookie to dole out. I'm giving that one to Duncan Robinson. 23 minutes of play for him. Finished with 14 points, 2 of 6, 33%. So he was Miami's best. I'm sorry, Caleb Martin was 2 of 4 from three-point range. So 2 of 6 from Robinson from three-point range, but showed some diversity to his game. I wrote about it for Forbes at the start of the season because I had seen something from him the preseason, expected him to be an X factor moving forward, and we've seen continued development from him, showing that really diverse offensive repertoire, putting the ball down, showing off the floater, some really nifty passing as well, even though he was only credited with 1 assist. He had some real nice passes, and I think he showed an overall strong game in his limited minutes of play. Quite honestly, I think he deserves to get a little bit more playing time. I know he's had some pretty bad shooting nights. He struggled against Portland. I think this is just the nature of who Duncan Robinson is. When he was a starter, it was a little easier to accept those because he was having this phenomenal breakout and getting so many opportunities as a three-point shooter where everybody was saying, you know what? It's okay if he goes 1 for 7 on one night. We know he's going to go 5 of 10 the next, and it's all going to balance out. He just hasn't had the same level, the same opportunity, and he hasn't been able to capitalize on those opportunities when he does play. So to me, I think we're just going to see this version of Duncan where he can go in and contribute. Is he getting paid a lot of money for that level of production? Probably. I know you're not going to see a lot of value in there, but at the same time, he's being asked to play a major or a significant contributing role, and I think he's done that more than not, and that deserves some credit. So good night for Duncan, solid night for him, solid night again for Miami in general. Maybe they could have gotten some better performances out of Kyle Lowry, who was only 3 of 6, did not look particularly aggressive. Max Strus shooting 5 of 15, not great. Aside from that, they got, again, 3 of 11 shooting from Gabe Vincent. Dwayne Dedman was a non-factor, despite the fact that he did go 3 of 6 from the floor. There wasn't a lot of credit to go around, but one player who did not get any playing time, Nikola Jovic, and one of you asked why he's not getting any playing time. I'll answer that in the next segment here on Locked On Heat. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Make sure to always send in your comments and questions. We love getting your feedback. You can always reach out to us via email at lockedonheat@gmail.com or via Twitter using the hashtag AskAllHeat. Be sure to please subscribe to the show as always and leave a review. We're close to 5,000 subscribers on YouTube. If you haven't done so, please click that subscribe button because we want to continue to provide the best coverage available, and we want you to get those notifications as soon as a new episode comes up. So make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Subscribe on all platforms, whether you get podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, Odyssey, or anywhere else. Make sure you subscribe so you can get the show as soon as an episode is published. This first question comes in from EJ Brewski with 2 O's. Why is Nikola Jovic not playing until the 4th? This would have been a good game for him. Maybe. I don't know. I don't know what this is. I think I will say it's 70% Erik Spoelstra not putting a lot of faith in rookies. And I think he's unproven. I think it's tough to put him out there when all these games wind up being so close. But when you've got a 15-point lead and your offense seems like it's flowing pretty well, it could use a little uptick. I don't see why you wouldn't put your 6'11" center out there who can run the floor, run the offense, make incredible heady passes, and has shown some proficiency from three-point range. That sounds like a player you'd want out there when everything is bogging down. You can't shoot any worse than anybody else out there. So why not give him the opportunity? I am critical of it. I think Jovic deserves those opportunities. Erik Spoelstra is one of the best coaches in NBA history. I guess he should know better than I do. I think there are concerns, certainly defensively, regarding Nikola Jovic, and those aren't going to be resolved anytime soon. Still, I would like him to get more opportunities. That's where the other 30% comes in, is that there are going to be problems. He's going to be, if you're getting blown out by Nick Richardson and Mason Plumlee, and your only bet is to play Bam 39 minutes in an overtime game, you're probably not going to put your undersized rookie out there to try and hold his own. He just doesn't have the reaction speed defensively. He doesn't have the size and heft. They're going to continue to build on him and slowly ease his way in there. That's it. He's not going to get that playing time anytime soon. I don't see it now. I thought he was going to be a rotation player because I liked what he saw. And I think if I like what he saw, then that coaching staff should too. Instead, not a single damn minute so far. It's been frustrating, and I'm sure it's frustrating for Nikola as well. But he continues to do the work, and hopefully he will continue to add more weight. And with a little bit more experience, he'll be able to improve his defense just enough to warrant some playing time out there. Let's see. Our next question comes in from Anthony. Am I the only one worried about Spo's lack of offensive play calling? A lot of iso ball, no movement, etc. Yes. You have right to be concerned. No, you're not the only one. I think a lot of people are critical about Erik Spoelstra. If you read our mentions on YouTube, certainly some people have wondered why Spoelstra is even regarded as a good coach to begin with, much less one of the best coaches in NBA history. There are questions there regarding his rotations. There are questions about his play calling. That last shot by Jimmy Butler, I don't know. Could Erik have called a different play out there? I didn't stick around for the post-game press conference, so I can't say for certain whether or not he was asked about that. I'm not sure if there was a design play. Erik gets asked questions a lot about, what the play was, what the intention was. And he usually he explains it fairly well, but it's a somewhat generic answer as well, where, it was our first action to go to this player, and then they wound up defending it well, so we went to our secondary actions, and then something broke down, and there's nothing you could do about it. No play call could have salvaged that. I guess I would guess that's his explanation for what happened in that last second shot there with Jimmy. I'm sure you also have to just put the ball in Jimmy's hands, and that's what you do. Look, Pat Riley was a hell of a coach, and there was a lot of times there where you just say, you know what, put the ball in Dwayne's hands and let him go to work. Sometimes it pays off, sometimes it doesn't, and Erik Spoelstra is no different. Uh, I think coaching in general is a little overrated. It's mostly about you do obviously have some play calls. It's mostly sideline out of bounds plays. It's also about managing egos. There are just as many people who think Steve Kerr is a fantastic coach who has wound up leading the Golden State Warriors to 4 championships, as there are people who think he sucks and has no idea what he's doing, and you only win 4 championships because you have the best shooter in NBA history. So that's your answer right there. Coaching does somewhat get magnified in terms of its importance, and it's also, I think, kind of uncredited for helping carry your teams through the tough times. Eric Spoelstra does a good job of just keeping teams very, very even keeled. They find a way to succeed even when there's a lack of talent on this roster, just as they do now. And I think that's the case moving forward. I'd like for him to perhaps, take a timeout and design something a little differently. But I'm pretty sure Jimmy Butler just says, give me the damn ball and let me go to work. Instead, he went to work and got an offensive foul out of it. So not a great final play there, but I don't know how much of that blame can fall on Eric's shoulders. This last question comes in from R.E. Gutnick. He writes in, is it time for Pat Riley to seriously consider shaking things up? No, it's not. The team isn't going to consider things. I'm not going to consider things. I know I somewhat lazily, slightly advocated the idea of blowing this up last week in a mailbag episode that we had, where I suggested, you know what, this is the year to do it. If you're going to continue losing, why not go all in on the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes and see what happens? But I really don't care for that. If you've listened to me long enough, and I've been doing this for a number of years now, you'll know my standpoint regarding championships is that it is almost impossible to win a championship on an annual basis. If you're lucky enough to get one trip to the finals, Boston Celtics fans think that Celtics team is the best goddamn thing since sliced bread, that Jason Tatum is a Hall of Famer, that Jaylen Brown is a Hall of Famer, that Marcus Smart can do no wrong. He could punch a kitten and a puppy in the face simultaneously, and somehow he still deserves a chance at the Hall of Fame. I think he's overrated as a defender, and I'll go to my grave thinking that. That's not about sliding the Celtics necessarily. It's just to show you that despite the fact that they believe that Celtics team to be a very, very good group, they've made one trip to the NBA Finals and got their asses handed to them by the Golden State Warriors. To get to the finals is very, very hard. To win a championship is even harder. 30 teams set out with that goal, and only one makes it. And I think so much has to break right. You have to have the right combination of talent, grit, tenacity, coaching, and luck. That plays a huge part in it because you avoid injury, you get the most out of your players at just the right time, and you somehow find yourself falling ass backwards into a championship. We had the best collection of NBA talent in Miami Heat history for 4 years, and you got 2 championships during that stretch and 4 trips to the finals. But you saw what they went through. That was very, very different from any other group in the NBA currently. Like, there is no team in the NBA that is as stacked talent-wise as that Heat group was for 4 years. And you still saw them lose to a much worse Dallas Mavericks team in 2010 or 11, and then again to a very, very good Spurs team that was fueled by hatred and vengeance in 2014. And Miami was just really, really tired by that point after 4 consecutive trips to the finals. So I don't think this Heat team is going to blow things up anyway. That's just not who they are in their team DNA. I think they're going to continue to wait it out to see whether or not they'll pull off more victories over the next 8 to 10 game stretch. And if that's the case, you just try to improve their chances this year. You don't want to waste Jimmy Butler's title window. You don't want to waste, us paying this kind of money for this roster in order to not get anything out of it. You're going to try to find a way to improve it. But again, the flip side of that is, what is Miami going to trade? What does Miami have on the roster that could potentially improve it in the short term or long term? And what are you going to, if you're going to blow up this team, what does that mean entirely? I mean, are you going to be able to unload Kyle Lowry? Are you going to be able to unload Jimmy Butler? Like, you try your hardest to get a player as good or maybe even half as good as Jimmy Butler. You've got teams that have been tanking for years. You look at the Orlando Magic. They might actually have a star in Paolo Banchero. He's been playing for a dozen games, but they've wasted years of that franchise, years of mediocrity. They had a really talented group with Nikola Vucevic, Aaron Gordon, They had Victor Oladipo on that roster. They had a number of good players, and they made the playoffs once during that stretch in 8 years. They went 8 seasons without even sniffing the playoffs. Then they did it once, and they've gone 4 years since then without tasting it. It's not a good way to go. Tanking is never the solution to me. You're just never going to get that boy. You want to call it rebuilding, you want to call it tanking, you want to call it whatever the hell you want to. It rarely leads to success. The draft is a crapshoot. Sometimes you get lucky, and if you're lucky like Miami, or if you're good like Miami, I should say, it doesn't matter whether you draft good players or not. You'll find a way to get the most out of their talent, and blowing it up is never the solution, at least not where I'm concerned. But anyway, that'll do it for today's episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. For your next listen, again, check out Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get podcasts. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks to everybody for joining me.